Come on, Soda Pop, let's go.
Thanks a lot. This is my first PowerPoint, so I'm hoping that I can make it work. What I've done this year, as I've done for many years, is go back, and as you may have noticed in the article in today's paper, I've been studying voter habits for many years. And I just want to talk about the 112,000 voters who are in Sioux Falls and who they are. 90% of them never show up to vote and expect government to do things right. They seem to be our biggest complainers. 10% show up to vote occasionally if the mood hits them, and they make all the decisions for society. And just think about the 5%. If only 10% show up to vote, and the winner is part of the 5% who control. In our system, you know, it's 50% of whatever shows up. Another thing I discovered in looking at everything was 15,000 people in Sioux Falls that aren't registered to vote. They don't care to vote. They just want to exist in our society and not even participate. So what we were left with in looking at everything was I found 48,000 voters since 2011 have shown up to vote in at least one election locally. And that left 33,000 voters who have shown up to vote in special interest elections. You know, these, I call them the lifestyle voters. They wanted an event center, a pool, and a Walmart. You know, there was votes that happened in those years and in those elections that it became popular to vote.
On that note too, what I like to do after elections, especially when there's special interests involved like Walmart, is I like to go and look at their campaign money and see how much they spent per yes vote. And Walmart spent over $20 per vote to get their Walmart passed. And of course there was a lot of other stuff that they did too. They got the city to go along with them and some questionable ballot language. And the other funny part about that is Walmart, a private corporation, had to spend $20 per vote. And the Snowgates passed at like 70%, and zero money was spent on the Snowgate campaign. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it shows you when people vote in this town, things that are important to the whole community, they'll go out and vote for it without any money being spent. But the large corporations have to spend a lot of money to convince people.
We've been looking at along with those lifestyle voters, the 11,118 voters who the only vote they've ever cast in the city of Sioux Falls was for the event center. So all they wanted to do was get a ticket to some, you know, Jason Aldean or something. And we are now left, because they showed up for the one vote with $180 million worth of debt without a way to pay it off other than you buying more stuff to pay it off on the sales tax. We found, and these are currently registered voters that I'm talking about here. So there's 5,951 who voted in 2014 for, it must have been for one of those lifestyle options that we had on the ballot that year. And they haven't voted since. Then we found last year 1,890 people who that's the only time they have voted in a local election. And so our question this year with our city council election that's happening on Tuesday, will they show up and vote this year? And then there's, I call us the dog catchers. The 1,837 voters in the city of Sioux Falls who will vote for anything as long as they can get in a line and vote. Scott and I are dog catchers. And these are the people who actually feel that it's the obligation of citizenship. And so I'm very proud that that as far as I can remember back, and since I changed my registration back in early 2000s to be in Sioux Falls, I don't have older data to go by, but I believe I have voted in every election back in Alcester to anything that I can do, and I'm very happy about that.
And on that note, you guys should all be proud as Democrats. Only one person, I think, yeah, just one person running for city council, Patrick Starr, who's a Democrat, has voted in every single election since he's been registered to vote.
These are important things to consider, because as we'll be talking about more, I want to throw in a little piece on the 17 candidates, and I know we have 2 of them at least in the room here that are running. We have this information that I'm working from is from a February 26th compilation of the state's total vote database for Lincoln County and Minnehaha County. And I have studied the school elections in all the communities that touch Sioux Falls to try and put all this information together. And so there were 16 eligible to vote in these studied elections. 2 candidates voted in all 5 elections. 5 voted in 4 elections. 3 voted 3 times. 2 voted twice. 2 voted once. 2 never voted in any of the studied elections. And of course, then we have 1 who just turned 18 and he registered to vote immediately, and then he decided to run for city council. I have, as a kid who got involved in politics at a very young age, this is my 50th year in playing in politics in South Dakota. I registered to vote when I was 17, as we were allowed to do that very first week that we had that right. And I've been very proud of Briggs for just having the guts to get in there and do that. So I wanted to just wrap up with, why should we care about this? And we'd like to be able to answer your questions and talk about it. It's free flowing, and Scott and I want to just stand up here and answer any questions that you have, because I know I threw a lot of stuff out at you just now, and very happy to be here to talk about it. So I could probably out-geek anybody in the room.
My one question is that number of people who vote in every single election was devastatingly small to me. So how has that changed from several years past?
All I have is a certain amount of data. And I started looking at this with the total vote system as they compiled everything back to 2000. And there were so many variables involved in it. What I did notice that the 1,800 and some that I put up there are the same group of people. They are in every one of those blocks. So and it's very interesting to actually study it and see how people who decide at an early age to start voting every election continue to vote in every election.
Until they get to be really old.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm going to go to a specific issue, and that is the new city hall that they're talking about building. I guess I don't quite understand what they're doing. Did they vote to basically write bonds, but not issue them until a final vote in October?
You're basically right. What they did, the reason they did, okay.
I'm not finished, so thanks for that clarification. But whoever is writing those bonds, they don't do that free of charge. So if, for instance, comes October and they say, no, we're not, on second thought, we're not going to build the new city hall or administrative offices, that's still going to cost the city money, even if they don't issue the bonds, right?
You would probably have to ask Doherty and Company, who write most of the bonds for the city and the state of South Dakota. But here's the caveat on all this that a lot of people don't realize, is it only takes 2 city councilors to ask for a revote. And as I understand it, There's 2 right now that are still on the city council that are considering it before the new councilors get sworn in. And I know that there's some candidates who have mentioned that if that doesn't happen, when they get into office, they will ask for a revote. So they can bring the issue back. And I think most of the candidates and the councilors right now want the building or some form of a building. They just don't like this plan.
One of the other things with it that, real quick, and then I'll get to you, Chuck, is my understanding is the city paid the attorneys to come out from Chicago and do the presentation. So yes, we are putting money into all the legal stuff that goes behind it, but if you look at that paperwork that was presented, it's a cookie cutter of what they've done before. And when the bonds get sold, it's going to go to the same group of people that have always bought them. So it isn't like this is any risk involved in this. So go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, thanks. Your presentation is very interesting. A couple of your comments, though, seem interesting, and they're somewhat like people running for city council. They appear to me to be against our city mayor. And so my question is this, same as I've asked them, the mayor has really had what I call 3 major accomplishments. He's had a lot of other accomplishments. He's had 3 major ones. He got the event center passed and built. He got the indoor swimming facility passed and it's almost built. And he's accomplished a negotiation regarding the removal of most of the railroad tracks from downtown, and it appears to be able to go ahead. If anybody here has ever negotiated anything with a railroad, that's probably the biggest accomplishment of the 3. Which ones of those, both of you, which ones of those issues were you for and which ones were you against and why?
First, I'll say the mayor's biggest accomplishment was getting elected out of being a nobody. In other words, no one knew who he was until he was running for office. And his original plan was to run for governor, and then his friends told him not to do that, so he ran for mayor. So that was his first biggest accomplishment. Number 2, on the event center, the mayor did not get the event center passed. My good friend Tony Reese did. He ran the Build It Now campaign and had a big chunk of money to work on, and he got a great get out the vote, as we showed. 11,000 of those people never showed up again. And as for the event center, I voted no on it. I felt that it was a gigantic waste of money. And it is proven that it was built, I mean, it's got issues, and I saw this coming a long time ago. Anytime you take a building that should really be $175 to a $200 million building, and we reduce it down into a $100 million building, I knew there was going to be problems. I was against the pool. I felt when Sanford came out and offered to build us a pool, we should have took it right there. Bad location, really. I mean, it's a horrible location. And what was the third one? Railroad. Another project that is 10 acres of land. It's going to benefit some developers. $27 million of federal taxpayer money. We're all federal taxpayers. Blown, and the railroad tracks are still going to run through the same exact place. It's not going to change rail traffic whatsoever.
Yes, it will.
How is it?
You're wrong.
Why?
And, you know, this presentation is really all about that. Neither of you, those 3 major accomplishments, and let's just take the event center. Have you ever done anything like that? Do you have any qualifications to criticize our public works department, our mayor, or anybody else for building something as high quality as that, and it's got a couple of construction problems?
Couple?
Minor.
Couple problems?
You know.
Yeah, a couple of problems. Yeah. Why don't you walk up on the 2nd floor and look at all the cracks in the floor? This is a brand new facility. We have holes in the siding like this, with water pouring in there.
You know nothing.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you brought the mayor along to defend himself, too.
We'll move on from this one in a moment, but I will.
Just clarification. They never said one thing about any one of those. You're the one that raised the issue. They responded to your question and then you became infuriated. But they didn't raise those issues.
They have.
And Chuck, this is where I wanted to bring up.
No, they were talking about voters and our voters.
This is what I wanted to bring up in this. I'm talking about voting patterns. And I'm bringing up information about voting. There's nothing, as Jim was just saying, that touches anything on attacking any candidate. We're not praising any particular candidate. We've never praised or criticized any one of these. What we were showing in this and what we are here today to talk about is about how Sioux Falls votes and what we can look forward to coming into Tuesday night. And I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to do here. So we're not criticizing anybody about anything. We're talking about politics.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you seeing any trend? Are you able to determine whether you have absentee voters as opposed to people that are going out the day of the polls?
Well, right now I've been getting the daily feed.
But do you see a trend that more people are doing absentee voting versus voting on the day of the event?
I'm seeing it about staying the same so far. In the way that we're able to get the data, I am seeing it staying about the same in the types of data that I have been given. And I'm going to hope to get, now that I've gotten one particular file, I'm going to be able to ask for that particular file style in the future so I can determine it better.
And to add to that, what we're seeing is, if we go by the absentee, that like we have in the past elections, we're looking at about a 9% turnout on Tuesday. That's what we're guessing.
Bruce,
9%.
the numbers you were citing were strictly city special elections. They were not the statewide.
Yeah,
were they?
There's no general and no primary elections in any of this information.
This is city and school board.
Yes, just local elections.
Could you direct some attention to whether the voters are educated or not? I've often thought we encourage people to vote. How many people vote and don't have any clue what they're voting about, and should they vote at all? The other thing is, in South Dakota, we have a straight ticket ballot. You can be dumber than a post and vote straight ticket every time, and...
Well, we no longer have that little mark at the top of the ballot.
That's good. I didn't notice that. That's good. But tell me what you think about how people should get educated so their vote is an educated vote, not just to check off the box.
Well, one of the things that in my work, and it's very frustrating, Dick, is wanting to go out and educate people and then try and figure out, okay, what is it we need to educate them? How do we need to educate them? We don't need to do big mass marketing campaigns. There has to be the ability to talk neighbor to neighbor, properly. I see people doing a lot of Facebook stuff and websites, but nobody really wants to go out there and read that type of jargon. We see a lot of simple, quick little phrases done to try and get people to show up, and I find that those really don't do it. The easiest way to get somebody to the polls is to fight something. The hardest thing to do, and this, Chuck, brings back in the event center, is that was a marketing campaign to build momentum. So we have to find a way to go between, the positive type of campaign to get something done and the negative campaign that devolves into the Republican debate this year.
My interest is how the voter records has changed over the years. Let's go back 30 years, 40 years, where we didn't have to flash an ID card. And as long as we voted, I think at that time, 8 elections, we stayed on the rolls, but the state allowed the auditors to remove people who had not voted 8 times. That's the figure that stays in my mind. We were, in my memory, the very first state in the union to introduce the voter ID card, but it's very straightforward. I don't think that we have the voter suppression in South Dakota that we see the nullification in the other states. But I would be curious, when I walk up to vote and I hand my driver license, okay, my all the information has just not changed over the years. what would knock a person off where they would be refused to vote if something didn't match up for this guy sitting at the table behind the computer? What is our situation in South Dakota, and now what's the rules for removing somebody from the rolls?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. That was an area I'm not going to get into real deep right now. I think that's another conversation that I'd like to come back and talk about, because one of the things that I've, in my research through the data, and I've spent hundreds of hours digging through this data, that I actually found where just shy of 5,000 voters, if we were actually following tight real ID requirements in Minnehaha and Lincoln County, would be knocked off the voter rolls, would be issued a provisional ballot. If we used the demands that they put on in Florida and Texas and all of these other states that are doing it. South Dakota, it hasn't gotten to that point yet. But the Real ID system really is based in cleaning up commercial databases of information. The Real ID system is not intended in any way, shape, or form to prevent people, from double voting. What the Real ID system is we have these large databases of all of our personal information. And in 2001 and 2002, after the mess down in Florida, it was decided that those databases were in such bad shape that we had to find a way to force the states to clean up all of our heritage and put it into the system. And I have strongly disagreed with the Real ID system from day one. We don't need it. North Dakota still doesn't require you to come in with an ID to vote. And I think that's what we need to do here. Jim, you asked.
Have you done any research on RV citizens? And my guess is the RV citizens, if they vote, they have a tendency of voting against anything that would mean a tax increase, whether it's on schools or anything else. But isn't this becoming more and more a problem?
Well, it is. What we've got, I went down and I talked to Heather Irwin in the auditor's office the other day, because I wanted to find out some more information about the RV voters. And right now I know between two of the RV mailbox operations that there's about 2,000 voters out of those, and they're in the Northeast District and out in the Northwest. There's one more downtown, and I haven't pulled their data together. And now, according to Heather, the RVers are not allowed to vote in our local elections. They can only vote in the national and state elections. And they have to actually be a resident in the city for at least 30 days a year in order to vote in a local election. And so that has kind of put a little different twist on how we actually pull that type of information.
So their impact is greater in state and national elections.
And in our district elections, and District 9 and District 15, et cetera. So.
Just a minor correction. Since 2014, North Dakota now requires an ID to vote.
Oh, they do.
Yep.
Okay.
That's actually been a pretty bad change for us. Since we don't have voter registration in North Dakota, all your address information must match on your ID where you're actually voting, and that's caused a whole heap of issues, especially for Native Americans.
I was in a meeting the other day, and I thought that they had done that,
Yeah.
and then this other person just insisted that they hadn't. So I try to follow that. So thank you.
Iowa doesn't require ID. Iowa doesn't.
But Iowa's been very strict in cleaning up your registration, and I had to go through that a couple of years ago with somebody. So, and it's a mess.
Yeah, but they don't require voter ID. That was what we were talking
Okay.
I remember not very long ago when I went in to vote, I didn't have my ID, and so they told me to go out to the car and get it. And I think Sue Rouse was the auditor at the time, and she said, no, they're not supposed to do that. there's actually a form you can sign. Is that still the procedure?
It's called a provisional ballot.
It's called an affidavit.
An affidavit, but then,
Allows you to provisionally vote.
yes.
Because they don't want you to go out to your car because you may not come back in.
No,
They don't want you to go
provisional
back in.
ballot and the affidavit are two separate issues. If you don't have your ID with you, you can sign the affidavit saying this is who you are. And as long as you're registered and in the books, then you can go ahead and vote.
But the other side of that, as I've run into, is if you sign the affidavit, then you have to come back in before the votes are compiled and presented to the county commission to present your ID.
No.
Not here.
No.
I know a lot of states are doing that, and I understood that South Dakota was moving towards that. So I've always tried to make sure, if you're gonna go vote, get your ID with you. So, yeah, go ahead.
I have some observations. I can't remember if it was the last school board election, you can don't remember, but it was a 3% turnout. So, and I don't think the majority of people understand that bulk of their property taxes go to the school districts, and if they knew that the majority of their property taxes were going to school districts, they would probably vote in a school district election. Was that the last one, or time before that?
Not the last one,
I got a little tidbit on that, and we're not gonna use the candidate's name, but I don't know if you read Joe Sneap's story today about the voting records of the council candidates. One of the candidates, and he's not quoted in this, I already gave part of it away, it's a guy. One of the people who are not quoted in the story, who had a pretty bad voting record, when Joe Sneevy asked him, why didn't you vote in these school board elections that you were eligible for? He said, because I send my kids to private school.
The other two observations is an election judge, I can tell you that the majority of people who come in, I don't know about absentee ballot voters, but the majority of people who come in have hair this color. So we've got to get young people, energized about the elections and get them actually to vote. The other thing is that I also see that when I was in Minnesota, you could register the same day that you voted. You can't do that here.
Right.
And people will come in and want to vote, and they haven't registered. And so we've had to turn people away. So that's an issue too.
To add to your comment about the gray hair, it's, if you were born after 1970, there was a strong indication that you weren't going to show up to vote. So there is a hair color issue here.
I have often said that how it should happen is when you turn 18, you should get a card in the mail that says you are registered to vote as a non-party, a non-affiliated party person at this address. If the address is incorrect or you want to be a different party, mark that on this and mail it back in and have an automatic registration. I have never understood why you have to physically go down and register to vote. It should be automatic.
And election day should be a federal holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be that the older generation presidents voted and the younger generation don't trust parties, so they don't bother to vote. And now you suddenly see that votes on local issues. Have you checked if they're young people, that they'll vote on an issue but not for a politician?
The event center vote was a good example of that. A lot of younger people voted in that, I know. Another thing about it that was really interesting about that was there was a lot of people that were registered to vote for the event center thing that had never registered to vote ever, and like we pointed out, ever. Some of them were in their 30s. And they were interviewing a lady on the news one night, and she was 35 years old. I've never voted for anything. And I thought to myself, and this is after the first black president got elected, and she decided her first vote ever was going to be for an event center. And I was baffled by it too, but it was a good get out the vote campaign. They spent a lot of money, they marketed the hell out of it, and like Bruce said, we got to find that space where turning fun things and toys and stuff like that, and that market, you get people that excited about candidates.
Go ahead.
Speaking speaking of hair color, on behalf of my generation.
Which color?
I'm colorblind, so you'll have to ask somebody.
So am I, so.
I'm personally embarrassed on behalf of my generation because the majority of people I talk to my own age, I'm 29 by the way, they say, I don't vote because it doesn't really matter and it's all a fraud. And they've never bothered registering, they've never even bothered checking on how the systems work. And in governments and civics courses taken in high school, they'll teach you structure, but they will not teach you civic responsibility. I think it's a responsibility of our schools to actually teach what happens on a local level so that when they turn 18, they know exactly what to do. Because there's only so much you can get out of understanding what branches are what and all that hoo-ha. Because when you don't understand the majority of local level things, it is all hoo-ha.
Well, I know that when I just talked about Frank Denholm. You know, by the time I actually got deep involved with helping Frank Denholm, I had already been involved in 6 years of politics. And as an 18-year-old, I was able to go in and actually help people get to the polls. I collected money. I gave speeches for the candidate. You know, I could tell you lots of fun stories about all of those years. And it's the only reason that I knew what to do was I got involved in 1966. And I try to express this to people, and as I meet people a lot younger than me and I try and get them involved in stuff, I tell them the stories that need to be told and tell them how important it is. The changes we're making right now in Sioux Falls with our city council and all this activity we're involved in all stems from what those lessons learned back in those days. And you have to do it.
And as for the civics part, I think the civics education that kids are getting nowadays is very lacking. And how I came to, in light of this, is Bruce and I helped out a little bit with the Change the School Start Date campaign. And no matter how you vote on the issue, it doesn't matter, we're not going to talk about that. But what surprised me was how little the school administrators and the school teachers knew about the laws around campaign and campaign finance and what was allowable and what was, and we had teachers, physics teachers, science teachers, you know, campaigning in the school when that's against state law to do that. And it ended after I went and brought it to the attention of the school board and the school's attorney. So that right there showed me that the civics, the teachers should have been the ones to say we shouldn't be doing this. But hey, outside of school we'll help you all you want, but not in here. So that really surprised me. So,
Melanie.
I went to the city council Tuesday night, and I was pretty surprised that when the vote came up about the new school building, a man that sat right by me got up and went up and said he was Dennis Bresky and that the city council could have the 300 building for $6 million, and it might take as much as $4 million to renovate it. And the discussion went on, and nobody had talked to him, and yet they had said, we've been talking to everybody that's possible in that whole area, and that's a pretty big building to miss.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Melanie, because Scott and I were invited to a meeting in City Hall to look at a briefing of why we needed the building.
Kenny Anderson invited us.
Kenny Anderson, the council chair, invited us. And when we showed up, the city's finance director, the building's
Projects manager.
Project managers, 2 of them, and the Central Services
manager.
Yeah, those 4 individuals threw a hissy fit and walked out of the room. And had I not had my cameras running, we wouldn't have caught it. And that should have been a tell that something is definitely wrong with the system, that they will only talk about it in an environment where they control all the variables. And one of the reasons why we are questioning so many things anymore is because when the cameras show up, they run. And they're afraid that we're going to catch them doing the things that not being as open as we want. And it's become, I've got over 300 videos up online right now of these things to teach people how it can be done, what is being done, and we can actually go back and look at almost a dozen different things that we've done this past year that have changed things in Sioux Falls. I got one question over here.
I'd just like to make a comment. From the time I was about 5 or 6 years old, when my father would go to political events, he'd take me along. I remember meeting Jack Kennedy. I remember Mother taking me to see Eleanor Roosevelt speak at a church. I don't remember everything that was said, but I remember going along. I take my little nephews along to every political thing that I can think of that's going on. You know, if you just take your little munchkin, your grandchild, your child, down to vote, so that they see what's going on, I think that has a powerful impact, and that's something that every single person in this world can do, is just take a young child. Now, you wait till they're 15, they're not interested. When you take them when they're 6 or 7, they're very engaged and they like to go.
And that's a good point, Rebecca. It takes little chunks of getting your friends involved and going around. One of the candidates running for city council came up with this idea the other day, and she sent postcards to her closest friends asking them to ask 10 friends to vote for her. And that's what I talk about, little pieces. Get your friends that are not involved in politics, your 5 closest friends. Get them involved.
Get them members of the forum here.
Yeah.
And for the benefit of our audience here, can you tell everybody the name of your blogs and where they can be found so people can get that information?
Well, Scott is the owner and author of SouthDakola.com. And I got involved in city politics because of this guy. I was always involved in national politics, doing things statewide, and I ran into an issue with the city, and I needed to do research. And this guy's got the best website of all. If you've got any question about anything about how the city of Sioux Falls works, things in the background, this is the guy that gave me a voice and allowed me to get involved in all these additional things I've gotten involved in.
They have other names.
Yeah, we have also SiouxFall.org. It's like SiouxFalls.org, but it's missing the S. We were able to get that domain.
How is it spelled?
SiouxFall.org, no S. And it's got all our videos.
Sioux is falling.
Yeah. And we want to wait till after the election. We have another website going up. We can't really talk about what's going to all be on there, but it's going to be a very comprehensive. It's not going to be a blog, and it's not going to be a video website. It's going to be something entirely different. It's going to be kind of a helpful website when it comes to local politics.
What was the first one? South Dakota?
South Dakota.
South Dakota. In fact, I've got cards, and I would love if all you wanted to have a card. It's back by my camera, and I'll hand them out to anybody who wants them, and it has all the web addresses on it. So,
But if you go to Dakota Free Press with Corey Heidelberger, you just go once. I only have to put a D in and it comes up.
Yeah.
And then every time theirs change, it pops up to the top. So you just go over and you click it and you're to
So are
that
you
one.
Dakota Free Press?
No, that's Corey Heidelberger.
Okay, I
But
don't
they have,
know.
but they have links.
But it's just really a simple way to do all this. Because every time you change, that's why you guys stay at the top.
I'm not that crazy.
Pick up their cards at the back. And we are also on, I mentioned the county site, and we are going to have a bunch of links on there to these different blogs. I would say we specifically asked our speakers not to mention any individual candidate or anything, and they did a very good job of it. They weren't the ones that brought up the other issues. So.
Y'all come back now. Here.